everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the 115 Fouls FPL podcast, the Fantasy Premier League podcast that brings you all the facts, fallout, and frolics from each week in FPL. I'm Steve.
I'm Jonny.
And this week we'll be reviewing Gameweek 18, as well as looking ahead to double Gameweek 19. First of all, though, it's time to bring in Jonny properly. Jonny, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm very well. The big question on everyone's lips this week is, of course, has Kevin Davis been in touch?
Oh, Steve. No, he hasn't. And you know what? It's reminiscent of being back at secondary school, just desperately wanting to make friends with somebody who just doesn't want to reach out and connect with me. So look, Kevin, if you're out there, look, we're nice blokes. We love you. Come and have a chat to us. We're desperately wanting to hear what you've got to say about all things football and all things FPL.
Love is a strong word, Kev, but we'll...
Don't listen to him. Don't listen to him, Kev. Love is exactly the word I wanted to use.
Brilliant. Well, it's a strong like from my part, and in a way that, you know, we just like to have a chat, Kev. So get in touch if you can, and maybe we should just move on from this, shall we, John?
Brilliant.
Let's talk about the game week 18 that's just passed before we move on to the absolute chaos of double game week 19 that is about to unfold. So, first of all, how did your game week go?
Okay, it went all right. I think I'm finishing on 52 points. So look, I think the important thing is I got the green arrow, right? So I think I'm in 24,000 now, which is circa 6,000 places up, which is good. Little bit disappointed a few players didn't come through. Devastated about Tierney not playing, especially when it's a drab 0-0 and Tyreek Mitchell picked up 8 points. But look, the plus side to that is I did see Tyreek Mitchell on your bench, so that did make me a little bit happy.
Yeah, I've had the unfortunate FPL situation of having a massive haul on my bench. I had 17 points sat there on a week where I scored 54. So percentage-wise, not great. Didn't even have a keeper as well that was playing on my bench. So it wasn't my best week in terms of picking the right players. I was 50-50 on whether to pick McGoldrick or Rob Holding in my starting lineup, and I went for Big Dave as a bit of fun, and it kind of backfired points-wise.
It was a bit of a Shane Long shot, wasn't it? Good.
That's brilliant. I mean, he has got that sort of similar striker really to Shane Long. You know, of yesteryear, where Shane Long used to start and not score many goals, and David McGoldrick is basically the Sheffield United incarnation of him several years later. And it's part of the fun, though, isn't it? You know, fantasy football is, at the end of the day, a game, and you've got to try to have a bit of fun sometimes and have those moments where you have a player in who does something a bit more interesting than just be in like a template team that everybody else is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I draw parallels. Dave McGoldrick, Shane Long, they got a lot in common. They both play in red and white. They both play up front, and they both don't score many goals. So, yeah, I'm with you. And sometimes you got to go for a bit of fun. Probably would have picked someone who scored goals for fun, though. But, you know, your call, Steve. Glad it worked out.
Cheers. Well, I appreciate that. I like you said to me the other day, I should have picked Billy Sharp, but that would have also been an even sillier decision, if we're being honest. The biggest middle finger of the game week was Tyreek Mitchell, which I'm sure about half of Premier League managers had on their bench at 3.9, especially those playing their free hit, who probably, you know, he might have come on for you if you didn't have Tierney. He might not have done if you didn't, or even if you did. So yeah, he at 8 points did quite well, didn't he? Really.
He did, and look, that player, he's got to be one of the most talked about players generally this year, right? I mean, Nathan Ferguson doesn't start the season. Tyreek Mitchell comes in, gets his start, 4.0, shoots up in price, gets dropped out of the team, and Van Aanholt comes back in, just shoots back down to 3.9, and now all of a sudden he's starting again, even though he's fit. Like, what do we do with that, Roy? I mean, do we play him? Do we pick him? What's going on?
It's quite amazing, really, because Van Aanholt over the past few seasons has been one of the best attacking fullback picks to have in fantasy football. I remember actually him winning me our mini league one year when I had him in on the last day of the season, where he got a goal,
Humble
assist,
brag.
and a clean sheet. Oh yeah, I know. I've always got to get him in there. You'll know this in a few weeks. Basically, this podcast is just purely about boosting my own ego. But Van Aanholt has really not hit the heights this season, mainly because of injury. Mitchell's done a great job, and he is obviously the lowest point of any fantasy Premier League player this season, apart from one who actually is a Blackburn Rovers player. You'll be happy to know, Barry Douglas.
Yeah, Tyron's got slightly more points than Barry Douglas, though.
He does, and in fairness, even if Barry Douglas was in the Premier League, I was about to say he might have got some more points. He's been a strange one. He's come up with three. He's about to go up with three different teams. He's been up with two different teams in the last few seasons. He got promoted with Wolves. He got promoted with Leeds, both looking like one of the best attacking fullbacks in the league, and then somehow has managed to be replaced when they've actually got promoted both times. So yeah, Barry Douglas is sort of the fantasy football option that never happened, which is a shame. But next season when Rovers are in the Premier League, that'll be when he really takes off.
Sure. Look, we'll see, both on the Rovers front and the Barry Douglas front.
The other thing to talk about is the Cup, which is currently running. How did you get on? Did you get through, John?
I did get through. Third round now. Pretty pleased myself. When you've had such poor league form as I have over the 10 years you've been playing this game, the Cup holds a special place in your heart. And thankfully, the guy that I was playing against, it's a guy or a gal, but I think it was a guy based on his handle, didn't have the strongest of teams, but did panic me a bit because he had 4 players playing. One of them was Kane captain. So ran a little bit closer than I thought, but in the end cleared him by about 20 points. So through, which is exciting.
Well done, John. We're all very happy for you. And I'm also through. I had a bit of an easier ride. I only had 4 players playing in the team that my opponent had. And it was fairly comfortable compared to last week. Actually, the first week of the Cup this season, I hit an opponent that had Traore, Saiss, Wan-Bissaka, and Foden, who all scored huge amounts of points that week, and just kind of managed to scrape through, which was on paper it looked like a fairly easy win. So just shows you on any one-off week, the Cup is just got the ability to throw up some little spanners that you might not have.
Which is interesting for you, though, isn't it, Steve? Because you're not, the Cup's not usually your friend, is it?
The Cup is not my friend. I think I've got to the 4th round is the furthest I've gone, and I've gone like last season. I went out even before the first round, didn't even qualify. So
lol,
it's not great for me, but this season, 2 rounds through, could be on for my best ever Cup run. We'll talk a little bit in a minute about the fact that we've got some decisions to make ahead of this game week, and I might end up running into somebody who has a team that is set up for this double game week 19 in the way that I am not going to be. So this could be the end this week for me. In terms of players this week, John, there was only 3 outfield players that scored more than 10 points. And Guaita got 10 points as well at the last minute for Crystal Palace, but I'm not sure how many people would have had him in this week. So there was Michael Keane, Phil Foden, and Paul Pogba all getting themselves 11 points. So not really the biggest haul from a lot of the well-picked players in the free hit. Are any of those 3 guys now interesting you going forward?
It's a hard one, isn't it? Because I'm going to say no, but only based on the other players in the teams that they play with, right? So, Phil Foden, great shout, hyper cheap midfielder for City, but Pep Roulette just makes it dangerous to play a guy who has started as little Premier League games as he has. He feels like a great differential at times. So for a free hit week, for those that picked him, fair play, great shout. But for the long term, not feeling it. Paul Pogba, again, Man United fan, you all know that now. But he's a great option, but he's probably the 3rd person I'd pick out of that midfield behind Rashford and Fernandes. So as wonderful as he's playing and the point haul that he got, probably not. And then finally, back down to Michael Keane. I know he's the second highest goal scoring defender in the game behind Kurt Zouma. But if I'm picking an Everton defender, can't ignore Luca Digne.
Yeah, well, he's now equalled the most assists by any defender in the league so far this season, drawing level with Robbo, Andy Robertson. So he's and he's done it in far less games. I think he's got 6 assists now in 11 games, which is quite impressive for a defender on fantasy football. I've got to be honest with you, I didn't watch that. Watch that game live, the Everton Wolves game, because I was watching Manchester United Burnley, which is on at the same time. And when it came through that Michael Keane had scored, I immediately thought it's got to be a loopy header into the far post, because that is the only type of goal that Michael Keane ever scores.
He loves a loopy header. He just loves a loopy header.
It is. It's his favourite. It really is. It's
Absolutely. He just loves a loopy header. I mean, look, beyond that, like Michael Keane, fair play, you put him in. But I commend all those people out there that played their free hit better than I did. And rather than just going with the generic, we think these guys are going to be the best, just really using it to see if they could get some points out of some differentials this week. And actually, if you took that gamble and played that free hit effectively and put in Foden, put in the likes of Michael Keane, then you deserve to be top of those leaderboards. So fair play. I think my lowly 50 points was not enough to beat that, and I think I'll be thinking about my free hit differently next time round.
Yeah, it's one of those weeks where it looked like the perfect week to play the free hit, and the reality of it is that a lot of people who didn't have not taken the points hit that they might have done. If there was people out there with 7 or 8 players who were thinking about it and didn't do it, they're probably thinking now that was a really good decision, because there wasn't good enough point scores around the game week to justify doing it in the end. But that's part of the problem at the moment, is that you don't know what's going to happen. This is probably the most unpredictable Premier League season that we've ever had. It's leveled out a little bit more, and we're not seeing the same amount of goals that we were right at the start of the season. But it's we've seen Spurs draw this week at home. We've seen Arsenal draw this week at home. We've seen scrape wins for Man United and Manchester City. We finally saw Sheffield United win, which I'm very excited about because I predicted it. But it's brilliant. It was a bit more of a boring week, I think is probably the best way to describe it. But at the same time, not the game week that probably a lot of long-term planning fantasy football managers had in mind.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. And look, I think a few things here. Look, first of all, this free hit week is out of the way now. We can get back to only having to worry about 1 transfer per week, potentially 2 if you want that 4-point minus. But also what we can put to bed is you stop gloating about the fact that you called Sheffield United's first win of the season and just move on. That would be nice.
Okay. Well, on that note, let's talk about our predictions from this week.
Oh, brilliant.
We obviously predicted the scores of each of the games from Game Week 18 before we started last week. We decided that we're going to make this into a long-running game between me and Jonny. It's Team Steve versus Team Jonny. It'll function much the way in scoring as the Super 6 app does. So this is how I'll be scoring it. We will get 5 points for getting the correct scoreline. We'll get 2 points for picking the correct result, so a win, draw or loss, and we'll get an extra 1 bonus point, because fantasy football, you've got to have a bonus point somewhere, for getting 1 goal away from the correct result. So for instance, if you picked 2-0 to Manchester City versus Brighton, you would get both 2 points for predicting the correct result, plus an extra bonus point for being 1 goal away from the correct score. So that would be 3 points. Alternatively, looking at my prediction last week for Wolves versus Everton, I predicted 2-2. The end result was 2-1, so I'll get a single point for that game.
You can see that Steve came up with his scoring system, given there's a 7-6 differential in the scores already, that the bonus point is obviously playing an effect on Steve's results over mine, but sure, I think it's just another game for you to beat me out of football, but hey, I'll accept it, I understand.
Well, in fairness, I could have had a full 5 points if it had been for the fact that the Spurs game had gone ahead, because I predicted 1-1 Spurs versus Aston Villa, and Spurs drew 1-1, but unfortunately with Fulham. So we had quite the heated argument about whether I got the 5 points for that. Jonny somehow managed to convince me that I shouldn't. So in a way, you've actually been quite lucky, really.
Have I been lucky, or is it the fact that you predicted a game that didn't happen more the point because you didn't predict Tottenham versus Fulham? Because actually, if you'd asked me, like, look, John, what do you think the score of Tottenham versus Fulham? I'd have probably said 1-1 with Harry Kane scoring first and then Ivan Cavallero levelling it up. So look, that's what I would have said, and I would have got. We can't prove that, right? So look, we're just gonna have to rule it out and just say it doesn't count.
I think it's more to the point that if you're predicting a Spurs game at the moment, you're just basically predicting that if they play somebody who is like lower than the top five, they're going to go ahead and then surrender that lead late in the game with some terrible bit of defending or a penalty. It seems to be a running theme in Spurs games so far this season that they just cannot hold on to a lead against some of the poorer sides. Anyway, let's move on
Yes.
to double game week 19, the first major double game week of this season, and it, quite frankly, is going to be the most chaotic week in fantasy football, maybe history, and that is not me exaggerating. It's been crazy for even the last 2 days, but it's also been crazy over the course of the last 3 weeks. There's already been 4 fixture changes since the start of this game week was published. The first one was Manchester City versus Aston Villa being added to this game week. Then we had Southampton versus Leeds being postponed. Then we had Everton versus Aston Villa being postponed. And then we had Aston Villa versus Newcastle being added. So there's 4 games already changed in this game week. Long-term planning managers have had an absolute nightmare, quite frankly, me included. So the first question to you, off the basis of that, should you now be thinking about playing the bench boost off the basis of that? What's your situation, John? How are you feeling about this week?
I just don't know. It makes me sad because this is probably the first time I've tried to plan in the history of fantasy football for a double game week with the express intention of having 15 players double game weeking. And they may happen, they may not. At the moment, I've got 11 players that could have a double game week, right? So that could be fair. But with current new announcements, there's potentially more. So, look, I just don't know. I think 50-50, right? I'm probably going to, in typical Jonny style, I'm going to flip a coin, head to tails, see where it lands, and that's what I'm going to do.
So the new piece of information that I've got for you, Jonny, is in the last sort of 20 minutes before we came on, Leeds versus Southampton, Ralph Hasenhüttl has put out into the media that he's preparing for both the Shrewsbury versus Southampton game, which is the third round FA Cup tie, to go ahead, but he's also preparing that might be called off, which is the reason why these fixtures have been moved in the first place. He thinks that might be called off again. The Shrewsbury manager has tested positive for COVID-19 today, so it's still running through the camp, and it might be a case that Shrewsbury versus Southampton gets called off, and Leeds Southampton gets added back in to the game week.
Right. Well, look. I mean, if that happens, right? Let's be really honest. There's a real justification for playing your bench boost, right? Because if you're not playing your bench boost to double up the players on the bench getting double game weeks, you're playing in another week where they might play anyway. But if you definitely know they're going to play once and they might play twice, that's maybe a gamble to consider. Oh God, Ralph, you tease. I just don't know where to go with this.
It's really hard. I mean, I've never been so torn about making a decision in fantasy football. I'd settled on the fact that I'd been planning for my double game week. I wasn't going to do it. I had 6 players in my squad who were single game week fixtures. It wasn't the right time. It felt like there was an opportunity for me to play it at another point. But suddenly, if Southampton versus Leeds went ahead next weekend, I have 2 Leeds players on my bench. I have a Southampton player on my bench. And so there's 3 players who would... actually, there's 4 at the moment because I'm going to probably take out Che Adams. So Che Adams is the 4th, but I'm going to basically wait until the last minute to make my transfers anyway. But if this game were to suddenly go ahead and I were to keep Che Adams in and to transfer out Martinelli as I need to this game week to play my bench boost, this suddenly becomes a really viable option for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just not 100% Luke Shaw on what to do here. It's
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Go on, Jonny. Tell us.
Yeah, Steve, if you didn't think I noticed the doubling up on puns around Man United fullbacks, I did. But no, kudos. I just don't know, right? Look, without disclosing my full team, it's pretty obvious that I've got 2 Leeds players, a Southampton player, and an Aston Villa player that may replace Harry Kane, right? That is my bench at the moment. And right now, if that game will give me an opportunity to get a minimum 6 more points, but probably more based on the fact there's going to be points in that game, especially with Leeds involved, it's swinging me towards a yes, frankly. Maybe it's worth the risk.
Do you want to know a bit more information that just to really add chaos to the fire as well?
You know what? Yeah, I mean, chaos is what I live by. I mean, I don't want to plan. I want to punt. No plan, just punt.
So the other news is that obviously in previous seasons, on the 31st of December, the yellow card rule of if you get 5 yellow cards, you get banned for a game. Would be implemented, so it gets wiped away. You have to get 10 to get 10 yellow cards to get a ban after the 31st of December, or equal amount of fixtures that are at that date. This season it's 19 fixtures, and there's some quite significant players who all have double game weeks on 4 yellow cards at the moment, who, if they were to be booked, would be banned for the second game. So do you want me to tell you who those are, John?
Well, I haven't checked, so you might as well.
Right, brilliant. So here we go. It's Bruno Fernandes. So
brilliant. I've got him.
First of all, that's good. Jack Grealish.
Yeah.
Are you writing this down?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought you might want to.
I don't do that, Steve. Come on, I'm going to take information, walk away, and most likely do something silly like putting someone that's probably injured.
Well, speaking of injured, Luke Shaw is another one of those players.
Oh.
Harry Maguire.
Right.
And Matt Targett.
Well, I have got Matt Targett.
There you go. So he could potentially miss a game. He's obviously playing City in the first game. Man United are playing Liverpool in their first game, which historically there's not many bookings in that game, is there? There's no bookings they're sending off. It's pretty tame, that game, right?
No one cares about it. It's dead fixture.
Well, on that front, just to take you through the teams who have double game weeks this week. We've got Aston Villa, we've got Burnley, Fulham, Leicester, Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City, Newcastle, West Brom, West Ham. It's there's some fairly big teams there, and there's a lot of crossover of fixtures now. So we've talked about where we're playing the bench boost, but is this a week for you where you'd think about playing your triple captain?
No, definitely not. Because I want any chip that I'm going to play, I want to play it like I'm guaranteeing it. And whilst I feel that that steers you towards definitely going with your high profile players, basically like Salah, which is usually what people go for. The derby just doesn't feel like the time to do that, right? And there's just other double game that's coming up. Plus, I just kind of like the ability to say, like, look, if someone else has used it, I can sort of keep threatening all the mini leagues I'm in, saying, yeah, well, I might be 20 points, but I've got my triple captain. So, again, probably not a lot of logic in that, but I'm going to hold on the triple captain. If I play any chip this week, it's bench boost, not triple captain.
It's funny that we started this podcast in the middle of kind of like chip season, essentially, where
I love
usually
chips.
everyone loves chips, bit of salt, bit of pepper, but unfortunately, we kind of hit the point where usually we'll be talking about making one or two transfers a week, and we're having to talk about major decisions of impacting your whole season. My kind of take on this is that there's so much uncertainty at the moment, as has just been proven by the small monologue that I did at the start of this segment, that you can't trust on the fact that a chip is going to come off for you at the moment in a way that usually you'd be looking at. Like, I think last season there was a double game week where Mane had two, Liverpool had two fixtures and a few people triple captain Mane, and he
I
got
was one of
1
those.
point and
I
got
was one of
injured.
those people. I
Were
was one
you?
of those
I
people.
forgot about that.
Yeah, I haven't. But thanks, Dave.
but usually that's the usual uncertainty you're dealing with. You're dealing with both that and the fact that fixtures could get cancelled, players could get COVID, and in amongst all the rest of it. And at the moment, in a time where the football's not been that exciting for the last few weeks, no one's really hammering each other the same way they were at the start of the season. If it was from my perspective, I think we should be saving our chips until later in the season. And also a big part of that as well is just that if you are in a decent position and it goes wrong for others around you at this point by doing that, you've got an advantage going forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, I that is all really sensible. But ultimately, I love triple captain chip more than any other chip. But I also hate it. It's the one that I feel like I talk about the most. And the reason I love it is it just really invokes the sort of the punty mentality of the way that I sort of play fantasy football. It's like, that's the week to play it. Definitely go for it. And actually, the first year they put it in, I remember it vividly. It was the year where Aguero scored 5 goals against Newcastle, and so many people put it in for that game and did really, really well, and it was great. And then other people triple captained him later in the season, and he had a double game week, and he got basically exactly the same points. And it was almost this write-off that like most players did that, and I was in the latter category. Since that, where I basically chalked out 75 points off 1 week off him, I think I've not managed more than 20 points of using my triple captain once, and it's just made me sad. So, look, I'm going to hold on to it as long as I can, hoping that I pick the right one this year. But I'm probably going to sit here at some stage this year and tell you I've done it again.
See, that the triple captain terrifies me for the kind of the same reason, but for kind of the opposite. I've always had a sort of steady away triple captain. I've always done a double game week. It's always a way. I think it's the best way to go. You might get lucky if you do it on a single game week, but the reality is you're increasing your odds of getting more points by doing it on a double game week. And each year I seem to do okay, enough points for it to feel like it's sort of justified, but never enough to really think, wow, I've absolutely kind of taken away any of my opponents at this point. So yeah, it sort of terrifies me that I'm on for a 4-pointer at some point, or a Mane situation at some point. So yeah,
Yeah.
it like pressing that button this year, particularly with the way that things are going and how well everything's been working for us, is going to be really, really difficult. And I think the later I leave that, the better I'll feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, like you say, these chips aren't guarantees. The free hit proves that, right? And it's probably the last time we should probably bring up free hit, but most people have used it this week. It's got most people a standard 50 points, but there's a lot of people that haven't used it there, and they've got 20, 30 points in the week, but then they've still got that chip to use at quite detrimental times. Can you imagine going into the last game week of the season in your mini league, knowing you've got like a little bit of ground to make up, and you can play that and just say, I'm going to play anyone I want here. That's quite a scary thought, I suppose, for some.
Well, one game week to look forward to for that, which I'll touch on briefly, is game week 26, which is going to be a double game week in this season. But because it's based on the FA Cup fixtures, we won't know who will be playing double game weeks in that game week until game week 24 or 25. So actually, if you still got your free hit chip, that's where I personally would be looking at it and thinking, this is a good time to play the free hit chip, because it's getting a double game week at a time when a lot of people have already played it, and also you're going to not know the fixtures well in advance, like we felt like we did this time, even though it's sort of backfired because, like you say, the Burnley game was added into this week, and the week after has turned into an absolute massacre. Also, the blank game week that follows that is game week 29. So
Yeah.
there's a bit of a gap there, a bit of time to rejig your team afterwards. You get free transfers in between that you can work, as opposed to this where if you play your free hit, you don't bank the transfer, so you just get the one transfer off the other side of it. So that it's turned out that a lot of people have now been put in a really difficult situation because of forward planning, whereas that might be a time, by that point we might have a league that's a bit more stable than it is right now.
Yeah, fair play.
The other thing to think about in double game weeks that we haven't really touched on is the single game week players, because there's a debate about whether you should leave in good players and whether they'll outscore double game week players. So, for instance, this week, Kane and Son play bottom of the table Sheffield United, who were without a win until this weekend. Is it in your thought process that, like, if you had the option between, say, Kane and Mikel Antonio, for instance, who I feel like is going to be a popular pick this week because of his fixtures and the fact that he's now the only striker at West Ham since Haller's gone, who would you have out of those two players?
Oh, that's two questions, though, isn't it? Right? I mean, I don't know, Steve. I've got Kane, right? I've had him a long time now. I think I did quite well getting him in quite quickly. In fact, when he was quite cheap in comparison to the returns that he's had, but he's a pretty consistent point scorer, and I think given that we're moving into a situation where you want to be making sure your team has got the players and they're getting consistent points, I wouldn't be taking Kane out for Antonio. I think the question for me is, do you want to be putting players in who you think are going to get big points in double game weeks? Yeah, I think Antonio is the option, but not for the sake of someone like Harry Kane. So, look, I'm going to say no on dropping Kane. But look, if you can squeeze Antonio into your team, I think he's a really good shout. Like,
so speaking of obviously good shouts, who are you looking at? If you had free transfers this week, for instance, who would be the three players that you'd be looking at?
Well, look, I know you didn't recognise the fact that I tried to use a John Ruddy pun there, but yeah, look, who am I going to transfer in? West Ham's fixtures probably have the most favourable fixtures for looking at defensive point returns. I think there's a lot of chat that Fabianski's fit again. He's probably going to start, a little bit of a niggle, no more. So I think he's a real option at 5.1 if you're looking for a replacement keeper just to sort of play two games. But he has got a yellow exclamation mark, so think about it. Beyond that, I think, look, it's City players, isn't it, right? I mean, they are just on fire at the moment. They're not losing games. They're looking hyper creative, and the big man KDB is obviously the way to go. I mean, you just can't ignore him. And look, Pep Roulette is a factor, right? So I think.
Do you think he'll be back on penalties?
Yes. I think he probably will. Soz Raheem, it just wasn't very good, was it? But yeah, it was. He's definitely back on pens, unless Aguero comes in, which again you just don't know. I mean, he's got COVID, hasn't he? So he's probably going to have to isolate. So unless he's playing,
I think he's just out isolating. Actually, I don't think he's actually got COVID, but he was in contact with somebody who was. That's what I've heard. But
I've heard that he's just got really into a Netflix series and just pretends he's got COVID because he wants to finish it.
Right. Which Netflix series do you think he's into?
I think it's that Sunset Dream House.
That makes sense. I think that's sort of up his street, really, isn't it?
Also, just to clarify, none of the information I said there was at all substantiated, and also I'm not even sure it's a real Netflix show. But that's what I think. but yeah. Anyway, no, I think City players. KDB, Cancelo or Diaz and Edison are your likely your guaranteed starters. But look, John Stones is still cheap, right? 5.0, City defender, clean sheets out all the time, right?
Well, Laporte and Ake are out as well at the moment as well, which really sort of makes him a certain starter as opposed to usually when you, like you say, Pep Roulette could take force. So
Well,
yeah,
Steve, again, thank you, because I have Stones and I thought he was a punt and you've just shot it up. So look, plan our punt, gone with the punt, it's worked out. Cheers, lad.
in fact, you've had Stones for a few weeks. And it's been working quite nicely for you. There's a few players that from my perspective that I just think are kind of slightly off the wall picks for this week, but maybe a lot of people aren't talking about. I mean, the first one, it sounds stupid to say he's a bit off the wall, but Jamie Vardy, no one's talking about him, and I think that he's going to be probably the go-to premium striker this week. And I know a lot of people are investing in a midfield because they want KDB, they want Fernandes, they want Salah. But yeah, he's for me somebody who I wish I had in my side, which I know you do, John.
I do. I've had him for a little while, albeit it wasn't planning for a double game week. I just thought they looked like they had quite a decent run of fixtures, and he takes penos, and that was basically the justification of thought. Albeit I did have palpitations one weekend where I'd captained him, and he was just on for doing absolutely nothing, and then banged a last-minute goal and took all 3 bonus points. So I was very, very happy on that front. But yeah, no, he's look. You can't ignore Jamie Vardy's goal scoring record, right? As a justification for putting him in a double game week. He just continuously scores goals, even when he doesn't look like he's going to score. He scores, right? And it ties back into my thing, right? Sometimes ignoring the stats and just watching him play, it's like you just go, "Oh my God, Vardy's got a goal and assist again today. That's mental." And he just does that week in, week out, doesn't he?
He does, but the thing, actually, to sort of contradict you a little bit, I've watched a lot of games this season where Jamie Vardy has just not been in the game for 70, 75 minutes, and then the last 15 minutes he just sort of comes alive and gets an assist or a goal, and it sort of makes me think that that he's preying on tiring teams or who are lacking concentration later on. But he must be a hard person to own because he does it so late most of the time, and he missed a penalty earlier in the season as well, didn't he? But he's obviously taken a lot of penalties as well. I think Leicester have got the most amount of penalties of any side in the Premier League this season, and I always hate watching my players take penalties because there's always that worry that there's such a big swing in one kick of a football while watching while playing fantasy football. It's not not a nice feeling. I'm usually hidden behind the couch at that moment.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I have been in that situation where you do have palpitations on it, or just not palpitations, but regret probably more, and then you say, "Oh, I've been reassured there." But look, I mean, it's worked out, and actually, like, he's been in my team now for quite a few weeks, and I'm not a KDB owner at the moment, and I've been wanting to get KDB in, but I physically can't. Right? You can't have them all. We get that, right? And if I have to get KDB in, Vardy, every single time I go into a game, I think, right, if I'm going to get KDB in, it has to be at the detriment to Vardy. And then Vardy bangs in a goal and potentially also an assist and gets a couple of bonus points. And I'm like, well, can't take him out. It's crazy, isn't it? So, yeah, no, look, I'm really pleased he's in my team already for this double game week. And if you haven't got him in for the game week and you're looking for someone and you can force him quite high priced up front, look, just really consider him. He's a great option.
Another couple of honourable mentions just to put out there. West Ham have obviously the best set of fixtures in this game week. If you don't own him already, Souček has been a great option for both me and Jonny this season. Jonny more so because he's benched him less than I have when he scored. And obviously we spoke about Antonio, Soufal, his assists, Cresswell, again, his assists. And if he's fit, Fabianski. I think Balbuena is isolating. So in terms of the centre-back options, you're kind of looking at Ogbonna as being the only sort of guaranteed starter there. Whether Diop will come in for both of those games is hard to know. So yeah, West Ham are kind of the sort of most practical option to go to for cheapo players. Jared Bowen, obviously, as well, who started the season very, very brightly and has sort of tailed off over the last few weeks and is a bit of a rotation risk with Yarmolenko sort of coming back into a bit of form. So, ones to think about. And I guess there's a few more double game week kind of teams knocking about as well who you might want to look at. Like now Newcastle have another fixture. Callum Wilson is probably the only player that you will want from them. Fulham, Cavallero, Lookman, maybe their defence. They've been strong defensively, but they do play Man United and Chelsea. And then standardly, Burnley, Chris Wood, who we mentioned last week, might be an option. And Aston Villa, just Grealish, if he doesn't get booked. Watkins is a good cheap striker, though he has had COVID, so he's a little bit of a rotation risk. And any Villa defender, because they are strong defensively, and they have Newcastle the second game. Right, do you think I've covered everything there?
Yes, I think that's fair. Maybe Anwar El Ghazi deserves a shout out based on current form, but apart from that, I think we're there.
Very true. He's done very well recently. Though Trezeguet is apparently back. But that doesn't mean that El Ghazi won't start, but he's just brings his place in the team into a bit of disrepute.
It does.
Should we move on to our weekly score predictions? Because we have a lot to get through. So should we just fire these off?
Come on, let's do it.
So we have first of all got Wolves versus West Brom.
Ooh, 2-0 Wolves.
I'm going to go for 1-1.
Oh.
Leeds versus Brighton.
4-2.
I'm going to go for a bit of the opposite here. Brighton 2-1.
Right.
They've looked good the last few weeks, and I think they might pick up a win against the Leeds side that are quite vulnerable at the back. West Ham versus Burnley.
I'm going to say 1-1.
Very nice. I think I'm going to go for... I might go for the same. I think I'll go for 1-1.
That's a weak guess, that, Steve. Just copying.
Sorry about that. It's just has that feeling about it. Fulham versus Chelsea, West London derby. The poshest area of London. What you saying?
3-0 Chelsea.
I'm going to go for a bit of a tighter game because I think Fulham have been better defensively. 2-1 to Fulham. Leicester versus Southampton.
I'm going to say 2-0 Leicester. It's a good side, but I fancy Leicester to sort of see that one out.
I'm going to go for 2-1 purely because Southampton have had some difficulties. They're without Danny Ings, and I'm not banking on Shane Long getting a brace. So yeah, 2-1 to Leicester. Sheffield United Spurs.
I'm going to go... Oh, it's a hard one. I'm going to say 2-0 Spurs. 2-0 Spurs.
I'm going to go 3-1 to Spurs after conceding an early goal. Man United versus Liverpool, biggest game of the weekend. How are you feeling about your team here, John?
No. I'm excited for the game. It's probably the best way to put it. It's exciting for this game to be exciting again. For a long, long time, it hasn't been. And look, I probably wouldn't have said this a few weeks ago, but our defence is probably marginally better than theirs at the moment. So, look, I think an exciting game, nonetheless, but it is at Anfield. But I have to back my team. I'm going to say 3-2.
That is fair enough. I'm also incredibly excited for this game. It's great to see these two teams battling it out for a place at the top of the league. Obviously, City are in there as well, but it feels like the fierce rivalry of Liverpool versus Man United of old is sort of bringing itself back. I'm actually going to go for a result which I think United will think is positive. I'm going to go for 1-1. And for it to be a United sitting in counter-attack and Liverpool to sneak one at some point because of their obvious quality.
Good stuff.
Next one, Manchester City versus Palace.
Right, well, I did think I was going to go with 2-0, but on the advice of my 9-year-old nephew, Harry, who's a massive City fan, he reckons it's going to be 2-1. So you have to draw your information from somewhere, and I'm going to stick with his knowledge and go with 2-1.
2-1 to Palace?
No, Man City. I mean, God. I mean, he's 9, not a madman.
This is actually, I think this is the game. The last game that we went to watch together live was this Manchester City versus Palace at Selhurst Park, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. which I love because Palace's pre-game, if anyone's ever been, it's great. It's just got so much pre-game entertainment over the other stadiums. It's wonderful. But it was a great game, and I think there was a penalty save in that game, wasn't there? Is that?
Yeah, it was last minute. Edison saved a Milivojevic penalty, and actually, it probably wasn't the last game we saw because it was a couple of years ago that we've been to see a few games in between that. But yeah, the Edison saved the Milivojevic penalty in the last minute, and actually at that point, Man City were on a silly unbeaten run in the league at that point, and it nearly ended that day. But there's also history in that fixture. Andros Townsend scoring that absolute screamer.
What a banger!
When they beat them 3-2 at the Etihad. I think it was at the Etihad. I'm right there, aren't I? Was it the Etihad?
Oh, Steve, I don't know.
I might have to nip that out if I'm wrong. I'll check it after.
Just don't fact check us, please. There's too much.
But I did get Kevin Davis playing for Blackburn in the early 2000s wrong last week. It was actually in the late 90s because obviously it was when we were in the before where he got relegated with us. So
Kev, that's just another stat we didn't want to bring up. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, apologies, Kev, but so it was the late 90s that Kevin Davis played for us. So I'm sorry that I got that wrong. That just means that I have to start doing my research now. That's the problem. I also feel like 1999 was like 5 years ago. So that's I need to get over that. That's in my own head. Right. Let's move on swiftly. Arsenal versus Newcastle.
I'm going to go something quite rogue. I'm going to say another 0-0.
Oh, I mean, they both played out very drab games like this last week. I'm gonna go for a 1-0 to Arsenal. I really don't see there being much in this. So yeah, 1-0 to the Arsenal, like the good old days before Wenger came in. West Ham versus West Brom.
3-0 West Ham. 3-0, gotta be, surely.
Yeah, I know I went for a West Brom draw in the first game because I think Sam will have got them all organised over this little break they've had, but I think West Ham will sneak this, so I'm going to go for 2-1 West Ham.
Super.
Leicester versus Chelsea.
2-2.
You know what? I have exactly the same result down for this. 2-2. I think it's going to be a good old Desmond. So there you go. We've got 2 results the same so far, so that's exciting. Manchester City versus Aston Villa.
I'm going to say 2-0 to City.
Very nice. I've got this. I like Villa this season. I think they're a really good side, and I just don't see them beating City at the Etihad at the moment. But I think it'll be a bit closer than that. So I'm going to go 2-1 to Villa. 2-1 to City. Sorry.
No, it's locked in. You said Villa. I
got ahead of myself.
You got to lock it in, Steve. Come on, don't be naughty.
Oh god, that slip of the tongue could end up. I mean, at least I got 2. It's like I've got 2 predictions in now. I can argue either side. No, I'm gonna firmly say 2-1 Manchester City. If Villa win, I won't be claiming it. And I'll also be nipping that out in the edit. Fulham versus Manchester United.
I'm gonna say we're gonna snick it. I think it's 1-0 United.
I think you're going to get a really positive result against Liverpool and then do what Man United seem to have done the last few seasons and pick up a bad result against another side. So I'm going to go 1-1.
So mean. Come on.
I don't know, but it's true. Liverpool versus Burnley.
I'm going to say 1-1.
Ooh, interesting. That's the first maybe more rogue shout you've gone for here, John. I'm going to say 2-0 Liverpool. I think they'll get back to winning ways there. Villa versus Newcastle is the final game, which is taking place next Saturday, so it feels like a lifetime away. But what do you think the score is going to be, John?
I'm going to say 3-1 to Aston Villa.
Interesting. I think it's going to be 2-0 to Villa because Newcastle did not look like creating any chances in that last game. No, so it's hard to back them to score. In fairness, they were down to 10 men after Ryan Fraser's sending off. So... yeah, that is the predictions for Game Week 19. Double Game Week 19. It's going to be a pretty bonkers week, no matter what happens, just in terms of the amount of fixtures and all the chaos that's going on. Are you excited for it, John?
Of course, I'm always excited. I always think I'm going to get like 200 points, so of course I'm excited.
I mean, I'm very aware that I'm not going to get 200 points this week. I will take if I break that 100 mark, I will be very happy.
Yeah, I'm going to go for 200.
Good. Well, I mean, if you put Shane Long in, then maybe you might have a chance.
Oh, Shane, I'm so sorry, but it's not going to happen.
The Shane Long shot, as you
Long
so
shot.
put.
Yeah, he's not going in.
Good. I mean, you don't want to, ruin Patricio your week.
Oh, that was probably the worst of this show. But so if you haven't got to the end of this, then that's maybe nice that you've missed it. But if you have, I'm just so sorry you had to listen to that.
And you can expect much more top bants like that in the weeks to follow. We're going to be back next week on Thursday during the middle of the game week to talk a little bit about how the game week is going, and also just to have a bit of breathing space to talk about some other fantasy football related content. It's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus it'll give Stephen time to come up with some better football player puns.
I'm going to literally go away now and do my research. That's my job. I need to find some between now and then.
Yeah, it's a good plan.
Right, well, that's all we've got time for. I've been Steve.
I've been Jonny.
And this has been the 115 Fouls FPL podcast. You can follow us at 115 Fouls FPL on Twitter, at 115 Fouls FPL podcast on Instagram. Get us followed, like, share, subscribe, do what you can, spread the word around. We've been absolutely overawed by the positive feedback that we've had so far, and we're all really pleased. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.